These beings pre-exist mankind, and they are not from the earth. They hail from a civilization that predates our own, the leader of whom will be the son of the dragon himself. We have entered the hybrid age. If you become something other than a human being, then you are no longer a candidate for salvation.
Timothy, your book is absolutely amazing because it shows historical and scriptural references about hybrid world leaders and technology that's going to be used to steal our birthright. But I want you to explain, because you explained the days of Noah and what we're looking at right now in a most detailed way. And it explains end times. So yeah, please explain.
Well, thank you for having me on. I believe that to some extent we're going to see a repeat of the events that occurred in the earth before the flood of Noah. We're going to see these events, something similar to this, unfold before the end of the age, because that is when the so-called end times are going to occur, is at the end of the age, this present age that we happen to be in right now. And that reference that Jesus makes to the days of Noah is, I think, pregnant with meaning, because it's not just about people who were caught off guard, who were marrying and giving in marriage and eating and drinking, feasting, and then suddenly destruction came. Certainly the destruction will be swift, but I think there's an underlying reality there that a lot of people miss because they simply don't understand what the days of Noah entailed. And in order to have this understanding, you need to inform yourself of a foundational perspective in Hebrew cosmology relating to what I call the Genesis 6 affair, an incident that happened that we read about in Genesis 6, but it's just really a reference to a larger narrative that was very well known to the ancient Hebrews, a narrative which is found primarily in the Dead Sea Scrolls, specifically the Book of Enoch, which describes a renegade company of angels, watchers specifically as they're designated in the Dead Sea Scrolls, who defected from the kingdom of heaven, who descended to the earth, and who copulated with human women, who took wives and copulated with them, and their wives, together with their wives, they progenerated a race of unsanctioned hybrid entities in the earth. And these were called the Nephilim. And what unfolded was a very nightmarish situation for mankind. And ultimately, I believe that the authority, the dominion of mankind on planet Earth was usurped by a hybrid race of giants. And that same kind of usurpation is going to happen again at the end of the age. And that there are, in my estimation, clear references to such an occurrence in the prophetic narrative in both the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation and elsewhere as well. And so it's really quite complex, and it seems like wild speculation, but in fact we are on a path even now heading toward a post-human paradigm on planet Earth. And so it's not as wildly speculative as it may at first seem.
Well, it's interesting because you pointed out in your book what Yuval Harari had said as far as we are the last generation of Homo sapiens, and that the Earth is going to be populated by post-human species. So it's like if someone heard your whole message, a few decades ago, they wouldn't even think that anything like this could be possible. But through technology and through more of what you have discovered with the Watchers, the hybrid leaders are going to emerge too. So yeah, but please explain more.
You know, you mentioned Yuval Harari, who is, of course, a famous futurist and technologist from the University of Jerusalem. And he is really I call him the globalist's futurist prophet. And interestingly enough, as you said, he's predicting that within the next 100 to 200 years, the human species is going to be gone. It's going to be superseded by a post-human species. And so he's predicting the evolution of the human species, essentially the extinction of the human species. And it seems ironic that Yuval's middle name is Noah. And I actually believe that he's correct, that in 100 to 200 years, there will scarcely be a human being left on planet Earth, because we would have, I'm going to use the word, evolved into a post-human species. And this is, of course, will take place through the agency of our own technology, that we will self-evolve, if you will. It's directed evolution, that mankind is going to intentionally disrobe from Adam, so to speak, leave behind the genetic markers that make us human beings, that make us the offspring of Adam and Eve, and become something that is essentially non-human. And it intrigues me that Mr. Harari is prognosticating that in specifically between 100 to 200 years from now that this is going to occur, because we happen to be in the age of Pisces, which, by the way, is the age of Christ. The symbol of the age of Pisces is a fish. The symbol of Christ in the early church was a fish, precisely because the birth of Christ coincided with the inauguration of the age of Pisces. And this is not some sort of pagan astrology. This is the timepiece known as the Mazzaroth to the Hebrews, the zodiac to the rest of the world. And the age of Pisces is going to be consummated in about 150 years. So we are literally going to be at the end of the age within the time frame that Yuval Noah Harari is predicting the extinction and directed evolution of our species. So it's all very interesting to me, and it coincides with, I believe, it directly coincides with biblical prophecy. And there's a few things that are converging, a few, let's call them subjects that are converging right now, that when these things come together, we are going to be in a Genesis 6 2.0 scenario. And this is going to give rise to what I call a new golden age. And in order to understand the golden age, again, we have to go back to the narrative of the Watchers that I referenced earlier, who descended from heaven and copulated with human women and procreated a unsanctioned race of hybrid giants in the earth, the Nephilim. And the new golden age is a resurrection of a hybrid empire. And that hybrid empire is predicted by Daniel in the book of Daniel, and also in the book of Revelation. So we are swiftly moving in this direction. And so I referenced, there are three things that are converging. And in my book, I portray them as three circles, three concentric circles that are converging, that pressing in on one another. And when they come together, I believe, and they're going to come together precisely at the end of the age, we are going to see the reemergence of the empire of the gods, this hybrid world empire that reflects the world empire that existed in the antediluvian world. And these three things are the post-human paradigm, which is what I've been talking about in regard to this directed evolution of the human species into a post-human condition. This is, of course, transhumanism, the technologies that are going to make this possible: genetics, robotics, artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, and others.
Further advancements in biotechnology, such as brain implants, would enable us to upgrade and improve human bodies, both physically and intellectually, thus becoming transhuman.
Then the other sphere that's converging is what I call the alien threat, and the revelation of an alien presence on planet Earth. This has to do with UFO disclosure, and I believe that we are going to, at some point in time, it's going to become abundantly apparent. It already is to most Americans. It's going to be abundantly apparent to the citizens of the world that we have visitors, that we are not alone on planet Earth, and indeed there are other non-human intelligences that are operating in our airspace and under the ground as well. So that's the second sphere. The third sphere is a new religion, what I call apotheotheism, a new religion that I believe will arise in the earth at the end of the age. And apotheotheism is the amalgamation of two words, apotheosis and theism. And apotheosis is the deification of man, and theism is the belief in the gods. And when you combine these two things, what you have is a statement akin to the gods exist and we shall become like them, which is, of course, was the original temptation to Eve, that if she would partake of the tree of knowledge, she could become like the gods. Those gods exist, they're real. They will show up on the scene at some point in our future, and mankind will endeavor to become like them, and will use, again, the agency of his technology to attempt to accomplish this. So, as I said earlier, this all seems very wildly speculative, except for the fact that it's all happening. Right. It's all underway. If you enjoy my analysis on these topics and would like to hear more from me, I invite you to join the Alberino Analysis Members Community, where you will gain access to my weekly private briefings, live stream Q&A sessions, behind-the-scenes updates on my current projects and expeditions, community features that facilitate interaction with myself and other members, early access to tickets for events I happen to be conducting, and a convenient mobile app to keep you notified and up to date on everything I publish. In addition to all this, annual subscribers will be treated to an advanced screening of 3 episodes in a TV series I've been working on for several years. These films alone are worth the price of admission. The Alberino Analysis Members Community is the best way to connect with me and support my work. If you would like to become a member, you can find a link to the subscription page in the description of this video, or visit thealberinoanalysis.com. I hope to see you in our community.
Right. And as you talked about, like, disclosure, for all of a sudden, 2017, we started seeing more in the news and congressional hearings talking about, quote, UFOs and, quote, aliens. And, for people who haven't listened to you, have read your book, they're going to just say, wait, can you explain what an alien UFO is? Because I know what you're saying as far as the Watchers, hybrids, demonic entities. But yeah, if you could just explain.
Well, it's becoming increasingly apparent that the UFO phenomenon is no longer a controversy. The controversy is over. UFOs are real. That is, as I said, apparent at this point. And some UFOs rather, absolutely constitute non-human technology, advanced aerospace vehicles that were not created by the human race. So who were they created by? They were created by a different species, let's say. Now, I know that many Christians recoil from the term alien or extraterrestrial, but this is unnecessary. This reaction is totally unnecessary, because the biblical narrative presumes the existence of extraterrestrials. We have in the narrative beings who clearly pre-exist us. Those are the sons of God, who, for example, in the book of Job, are shouting for joy when the foundations of the earth are being laid. So clearly, there are beings, conscious beings, who pre-exist mankind. And these beings are denominated as the sons of God in the Old Testament. And we call them angels. The Bible uses this very nebulous term, angels, and it's intentionally ambiguous, the term. It doesn't always refer to non-human beings. Sometimes it refers to humans, because it's simply a designation of occupation. In other words, an angel is a messenger, an envoy, one who is sent. That's it. It does not give us any insight into the nature of the messenger. It just tells us what that being is doing. They're delivering a message. But when we we are all familiar in the biblical narrative of non-human messengers who come from somewhere else. So as I said, the biblical narrative presumes the existence of these beings, of extraterrestrials. And well, why do I say extraterrestrials? Because clearly, if you have the sons of God shouting for joy while the earth is being created or recreated, however you would have it, these beings pre-exist mankind, and they are not from the earth. They're from somewhere else. So the word extraterrestrial, the term extraterrestrial simply means, and let's be specific to conscious beings, because you could talk about microbes and bacteria and things like this. Let's be specific to conscious entities. Extraterrestrial simply designates any being whose provenance, whose origin is not planet Earth. So we just have to back up and ask the question, are we presented in the biblical narrative with entities whose origin, whose provenance is not planet Earth? And the answer is unequivocally yes, of course we are. These are the angelic beings who we encounter. And these angelic beings certainly constitute a race, and they are not from the earth. They are therefore extraterrestrial. Now, you can quibble about where exactly they come from, and you can say, well, they come from a spiritual realm, or they come from an extra-dimensional realm, or whatever. It doesn't make a difference whether they come from an extra-dimensional realm, a spiritual realm, or another planet. They're still extraterrestrial. Indeed, they're even alien, because the word alien is a little bit more ambiguous, but the word alien specifies any, and let's again be specific to conscious beings, any conscious being who is not us, that is not the human species, would be classified as alien to the human species. So, as I said, clearly the biblical narrative presents us with entities, conscious, non-human intelligences that are not from the earth. This is the biblical worldview. This is not some sort of a secular position here. This is the biblical worldview. So I think that as we move forward in time and approach the end of the age, we ought to get used to, as Christians, I certainly am a Christian, we ought to get used to the reality that the biblical narrative presumes the existence of non-human extraterrestrial entities.
Okay, I totally understand. I know for me, I know I'm probably just a simple housewife, and I still call them fallen angels, but
well, what about the ones that aren't fallen?
Okay.
You're still dealing with the same.
Oh, well, okay. Well, you have good angels, bad angels, but I mean,
right. You're dealing with the same race, and both. A fallen angel is simply a defected son of God. These beings, they come from the same kingdom. They're of the same nature. Indeed, I would argue very strongly that they look the same. A defected angel or an apostate son of God, which is probably the best way to describe them. An apostate son of God is still looks like the rest of the sons of God. The nature of the being doesn't change when they defect. Rather, their allegiance is what changes. So you have this angelic race, let's call them, because I do believe they constitute a race. Indeed, I do believe they hail from a civilization that predates our own, indeed the kingdom of heaven. And I think there's a misconception that so-called fallen angels are sort of a different breed or of a different nature than unfallen angels. In other words, the defected sons of God somehow are different than the faithful sons of God, the sons of God who remain in the kingdom. And I'm talking here about these angelic beings. But the truth is, it would be no different than human beings. For example, the sons of Seth, as opposed to the sons of Cain. The sons of Seth were in the righteous line of Adam, and for the most part were faithful to God, and the sons of Cain were in the unrighteous line of Cain and were to some extent defected from allegiance to their maker. And yet they all look like human beings. And they all do the sorts of things that human beings do, and they use the same technology, and they have the same knowledge. Well, we can impose the same idea on angelic beings. You have in heaven, wherever that is, you have a group of faithful sons who are with the Father, who are in the kingdom. And then you have a much smaller group of defected sons, apostate sons, who are no longer in the kingdom, who have rebelled against the king and are in a state of apostasy. And those sons happen to be here, at least in part, and are working to beguile and mislead and deceive us, mankind. And so in my book, I reference this angelic race because the word angel, as I said, is very ambiguous. And so I use a different term that I've coined in my book to reference these angelic beings. I call them the elder race because they clearly pre-exist mankind, and I believe they do constitute a race. They are a race of beings who were created in a pre-Adamic context and clearly exist in the biblical narrative. So the term that we use to designate these apostate sons of God, which has become a popular term in Western Christianity, is fallen angel, because fallen, of course, denotes the idea that they have defected from the kingdom. But I think if we can understand who these beings are, that they're not just some sort of spiritual wraiths, but rather intelligent creatures who look very much like us, rather we look very much like them. In fact, I believe that we are the younger sibling and that these angelic beings are our elder siblings. And this is borne out, I believe, in the parable of the prodigal son, and also in just the nomenclature that is used throughout the scriptures. For example, as I said, the sons of God in the Old Testament are exclusively angelic beings. That term, B'nai Elohim, sons of God, is only ever used of angelic beings, of non-human extraterrestrial entities. That's the only context for the term sons of God in the Old Testament. Now, interestingly enough, in the New Testament, Jesus says that we who believe in him are given power to become the sons of God, even like the angels. And of course, the power that Jesus speaks of is the resurrection. And the reason why we're given power to become sons of God is because we were created in the beginning to be sons of God. Adam was a son of God. Look at the genealogy of Jesus of Nazareth, which is traced all the way back to Adam, and Adam who's declared to be, at the end of the genealogy, the son of God. So Adam was created to be a member of the family. And this is about the human story is a story of reconciliation to the family of God in Christ. So we have, of course, the situation in the beginning where Adam and Eve are sundered from the family of God. They're divorced from the family of God. And this, of course, creates all of the chaos and tragedy that we have today in the earth. And those of us who are offsprings of Adam and Eve are in this condition, this fallen condition, sundered from the family of God. And this was the mission of Christ, to redeem, reconcile, and restore the lost sons and daughters of Adam and Eve back into the family of God as sons and daughters. So we will be, at the resurrection, we will be restored to the family of God as sons, as members of this divine family, and we'll be reunited, not only reconciled to the Father, which is the most important thing, but also reconciled to the rest of the family, the other sons of God in heaven. And then none of what I'm saying is extra or anti-biblical. Everything I'm saying is stated emphatically in the Bible.
Right. Well, your book definitely explains a lot more details. And now I know some people know this, but some people don't know this as far as, when I first became a believer and I read about Noah and when it said he was perfect in his generations, I mean, just as a new believer, I was like, he wasn't perfect. And then when you realize and your book really explains biologically pure that totally explains everything. And as in the days of Noah, what's going on that is going to make us not biologically pure? And then also when you bring up, as in the days of Noah, that hybrids were ruling the earth, and that's what we're going to be seeing too with world leaders being hybrids. But why do they have to be hybrids? Why can't the devil just do what he wants?
Well, this all goes back to what I call the protocols of authority. And the reason why my book is called Birthright is because it is about the birthright of mankind, which is dominion of the earth, that Adam was bequeathed dominion of the earth. He was not told to take dominion, rather to have dominion. He was given dominion over planet Earth, and the right to rule is given exclusively to Adam and his offspring, forever, by the way. So there's this, we reference the Genesis 6 affair, and it gets very complicated, but we have to understand authority. So we have authority to do what we do, which is to govern the earth. That's one of the reasons why we were created, in fact, was to govern the earth. I say we were created for two primary purposes. One was to fellowship with the Father, to be sons in the kingdom, in the family of God, and then secondarily to govern the earth, because the sons of God govern. The princes in the kingdom govern. And so we were created to govern the earth, and to do so according to the precepts and principles of the kingdom of heaven, to extend the kingdom of heaven throughout the earth, essentially. And of course, we've done a very bad job of that in our fallen state, but that is still the mandate, and dominion of the earth is still the birthright of mankind, exclusively the birthright of mankind. So this gets us into a conversation, as I said, about the protocols of authority. What is the adversary's authority on the earth? What is his authority? His authority is not to govern the nations. That is our authority. So in order for an angelic being to take authority on earth, he has to usurp it from us. And there's two ways that this can happen. One, it can be in the realm of influence. And that is certainly the primary way that authority is usurped from the human species, and that we are enticed to do things that are contrary to our mandate, and that are contrary to the will of God. And it is, of course, our adversaries who entice us to do this. The devil and his angels entice us to disobey the ordinances of God, and we then come under the influence of his enemies, right? And so this is the modus operandi of the devil and his angels in the earth, is to always be enticing mankind to transgress the will of God, and in that way we are manipulated to do the things that the adversary wants us to do, whatever those things may be. And that is an indirect control over mankind. It's not directly possessing the nations and ruling. Rather, it's through temptation, it's through guile, leading us astray. This is the authority that the devil has on earth. He has the authority to tempt and to lead mankind away, and to manipulate the affairs of the world by doing so. But it's still human beings who govern. It's just that their hearts are corrupted, and they follow after the enemies of God rather than God himself. But then there's a second way that authority can be usurped from the human species, and that is through the progeneration of a hybrid being, a being who is not entirely human, but human enough to inherit the birthright of Adam, dominion of planet Earth. And this is, again, what I was discussing earlier concerning the Genesis 6 affair and the Watchers and everything that transpired in the antediluvian world, which is to some extent going to happen again at the end of the age, in my estimation. I believe that the Antichrist, this personage that we describe as the Antichrist, is in fact, the beast is in fact going to be a hybrid. That's why he has all the authority of his father, the dragon, but he also has the authority to govern the nations, because he is a son of Adam. And so this is, it gets very complex. That's why I always encourage people who might be confused to read the book, read Birthright, because I take a considerable amount of time explaining what I mean by these protocols of authority and how authority is and can be usurped from mankind. And clearly, this is the scenario in which we find ourselves, because only human beings govern the earth. That's evident. There's nothing other than human beings governing planet Earth. Now, there are very evil human beings who can govern planet Earth and who, again, are being manipulated by non-human entities. But be that as it may, they're still human beings sitting on human thrones. And so it's very important to understand the protocols of authority that are evident in the biblical narrative, in order to then understand the unfolding of events at the end of the age. I believe that these fallen angels are the they who will mingle their seed with the sons of men to create these 10 hybrid kings at the end of the age, the leader of whom will be the son of the dragon himself. We have entered what futurists and technologists describe in their scientific papers as the hybrid age. And when you combine these technologies, what you have is the power to fundamentally alter, modify the human species. And if you evolve out of Adam, if you become something other than a human being, then you are no longer a candidate for salvation in the cross of Christ. And how will they resist the return of Christ? Well, they'll do it with the post-human army.
Can you explain then, like, when hybrid world leaders, and explain Nebuchadnezzar as far as how that's really describing those kind of entities?
Hybrid world leaders, of course, we're referring here to a scenario that will unfold, that will, in my estimation, unfold at the end of the age. And I think it might be important to explain how that might unfold. We talk about, in the antediluvian world, the Watchers progenerating hybrid offspring with human women. Well, I believe that at the end of the age, the same sort of thing is going to happen, but this time it's going to be the dragon and his angels. Because in the book of Revelation, we see that the primary instigator of the events that are unfolding at the end of the age is the dragon, who is described as that serpent of old, who is the devil. And he, the dragon is depicted in the book of Revelation as this creature with 7 heads. And he gives rise to the beast, and the beast looks very much like him. And the beast has 7 heads. And so, and indeed, the dragon is standing on the shore of the sea, presiding over the rise of the beast. And the dragon is clearly the devil. And the devil, who is the devil? The devil isn't some, grotesque being with horns and a pitchfork running around, just trying to get people to do bad things. The devil is a defected son of God. He is an apostate son of God. And he is, ultimately, I believe, trying to forestall his inevitable fate, and is making war with God and the people of God. And in Revelation, as I said, he's presiding over the rise of the beast. Who is the beast? Well, the beast is an earthly king. And I believe that there's an indication here, and this gets very complex, there's an indication here that the devil and his angels are going to father 10 kings. They're going to father, and when I say father, what I mean is they're going to copulate with human women and produce 10 hybrid sons who are going to rule the nations at the end of the age. This is what we mean when we say a hybrid kingdom, or the re-emergence of the empire of the gods. Because you're going to have the dragon and his angels, who are, of course, apostate sons of God, non-human entities, but their sons are going to be hybrid entities who are the product of angelic and human, let's say, DNA. And this again seems fantastical, but this is what is we're headed for here on the earth in regard to post-human paradigm, and I explain how that connects to this idea of this hybrid empire that's arising in the earth. And then B, I believe this scenario is clearly symbolized, depicted in the book of Revelation. So this is what I mean when we talk about a hybrid kingdom at the end of the age and hybrid beings in the vein of Genesis 6 emerging in the earth, and the beast's empire being hybrid empire. And this is all, again, explained in my book. I know it's difficult to jump from different subjects without laying all the necessary groundwork for people who have no idea what we're talking about to understand how I get from A to Z, because it is quite complex.
Yeah, no, the book is amazing, and really you give so many scriptural and historical references, and I thought it was the most brilliant explanation. But also, oh no, it really is, and people need to get the book. Because for me, I'm looking at what's going on in the world right now, and I also know a lot of people are just, the devil is trying to blind people. I found it interesting what you said, how it was prophesied. I don't know, was it there's a prophecy in the Bible, and I'm sorry, but I'm forgetting where it is, but that really explains what happened in the 1800s, where all of a sudden we started believing in, the geological, and how that led to Darwinism. But can you just explain that? Because I found that very interesting. And this is to get people to forget about the flood, to forget about what happened.
That's right. Yeah. So previous to the 1800s, to the late early 1800s, the scientific community was unanimous in their belief of a global flood or a global cataclysm. The predominant view at the time was called catastrophism, the geological view of doctrine of catastrophism. And the doctrine of catastrophism simply proposes that the earth has been subject to dramatic change, sudden and dramatic change through cataclysm, i.e. the flood of Noah. And other cataclysms. And again, this was the prevailing doctrine, geological doctrine of the time, until a man by the name of Charles Lyell, he wrote a very influential book where he proposed a new doctrine called the doctrine of Uniformitarianism. And Uniformitarianism is, simply put, the opposite of catastrophism. Uniformitarianism propounds that the earth has not been subject to catastrophic change, geologically speaking, rather very gradual, slow, incremental change over millions of years. And to paraphrase it, we can explain all of the geological features on planet Earth through this very same mechanisms we see in operation today. So just slow, gradual changes over millions of years can resolve all questions related to geology, all of the formations, for example, the Grand Canyon, all of these alterations on the surface of the earth can simply be explained by vast amounts of time and gradual change. And now that seems rather innocuous, except it completely disregards cataclysm. And by disregarding cataclysm, it seeks to ignore specifically the flood of Noah, the biblical account, to disregard the biblical account. And so after Lyell, of course, in my book I talk about how Charles Lyell paved the road for Charles Darwin. Darwin, who came after Lyell, and Darwin in his book The Origin of Species, acknowledges Lyell and basically says that that his work could never have been possible without Lyell first laying the foundation. And why is that? Simply put, because the theory of evolution, Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection, required millions of years. And millions of years was simply not contemplated before Lyell. And so the prevailing view of catastrophism gave way to this new doctrine of uniformitarianism. And uniformitarianism, in turn, allowed for the rise of the theory of evolution by natural selection. And all of that, of course, gradually dissuaded the intellectual community from the biblical narrative. And that's basically where we are today. So I think, though, that both uniformitarianism and evolution by natural selection, Darwinism, both of those theories are falling apart in the modern age, actually. I think it's becoming widely recognized today that the Earth has been subject to catastrophism, to cataclysms, and that macroevolution, the theory of evolution by natural selection as proposed by Darwin, is simply untenable for many reasons. And so both of those theories are collapsing, interestingly enough, are beginning to collapse, are in decline today among the intellectual community. It's still the majority, don't get me wrong, but we're seeing a gradual decline in both the doctrine of uniformitarianism and the theory of evolution.
Yeah, and I find it interesting when you were saying all of that really is a fulfillment of prophecy of scoffers in the last days in 2 Peter
Yes.
Chapter 3. That to me definitely fulfills that prophecy. And also in the 1800s, I mean, then you all started having more, with humanism, but that the whole point of this was to get people to forget what happened with the catastrophe, because,
That's right.
as you said, as in the days of Noah, it's going to happen again, and they
right.
want people to forget. Timothy, can you explain the book of Daniel and the description in there that relates to hybrids?
Well, there's in the second chapter of Daniel, there's a famous incident in which the King Nebuchadnezzar is vexed by the dream of an imposing statue, the head of which is made of gold, the chest and arms of silver, the midsection of bronze, the legs of iron, and the feet with 10 toes of iron mixed with clay. And Daniel, who is summoned to interpret the dream, explains to the king that the statue's segmented anatomy, cast in distinctive metal, signifies 5 empires that would arise to dominate the known world, including and succeeding his own, which is depicted in the head of gold. Of course, we know today, and if you'll allow me, I'll just read this from my book here. It's easier than trying to recall it off the top of my head. With the benefit of hindsight, scholars and historians have been able to confirm the astonishing accuracy of Nebuchadnezzar's dream and have come to a general consensus regarding whom the metals represent. The duo of the chest and arms, cast in silver, is symbolic of the Medo-Persian Empire. The midsection, made of bronze, the Grecian Empire. The legs of iron, a fitting portrayal of the Roman Empire, which was ultimately divided between East and West. And the feet, made of iron mixed with clay, perfectly express the fractured perpetuation of Rome, which was never conquered but dissolved into the multicultural complex of European nations in the Holy Roman Empire. Aside from its historical fulfillment in the Holy Roman Empire, the final empire, depicted in the feet of the statue, presumably with 5 toes on each foot, directly correlates to the beast of Revelation. Well, this gets into some details we did not discuss, but I'll read it anyway. I'm reading from my book, by the way. The beast of Revelation and its 10 horns, which represent 10 kings who will arise to rule the earth at the end of the age. And then I make a correlation to Plato's description of Atlantis here, which we didn't cover, but I talk about that in the book. The feet and toes of the statue are composed of iron mixed with potter's clay. Now, potter's clay is symbolic of the human race, since in contrast with the elder race, which I referenced earlier, man was molded by the hands of the maker from the substance of the earth itself, as a potter forms his clay. And of course, we know that this is indeed the case in reference to the human species. In the Bible we read, "But now, O Lord, you are our Father, we are the clay, and you are our potter. We are all the work of your hand." That's in Isaiah 64:8. The meaning of the iron mixed with potter's clay metaphor is twofold. First, it represents the aforementioned Holy Roman Empire, which, due to its culturally heterogeneous composition, like iron mixed with clay, was partly strong and partly fragile. And then in Daniel, we read, "Whereas you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, yet the strength of the iron shall be in it, just as you saw the iron mixed with ceramic clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly fragile. And this is where it gets interesting. And this is this is Daniel's interpretation of the king's dream, of Nebuchadnezzar's dream. As you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay, they will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. And in the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. And the kingdom shall not be left to other people. It shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. And I write this in regard to this very strange declaration in Daniel. The second meaning of iron mixed with potter's clay may be discerned in the pronouncement, they will mingle with the seed of men, which refers to the 10 kings represented in the 10 toes, during whose reign Christ will return to pulverize the empire of the beast, as described in the verses that follow. So the mingling with the seed of men, I go on to say, recalls to mind the miscegenation of the Watchers who procreated hybrid offspring with human women. And so I propose that it would seem then that the 10 kings of the final world empire will be the progeny of the gods, so to speak, of quote-unquote fallen angels. And I believe that these fallen angels are the they who will mingle their seed with the sons of men to create these 10 hybrid kings at the end of the age, who will, the leader of whom, again, in my estimation, will be the son of the dragon himself, the beast, human enough to inherit the birthright of Adam and appropriate the authority of the human species on planet Earth. And this, again, there are many references that I make to different verses in Daniel and Revelation to buttress this idea. And we are, by the way, we have entered what futurists and technologists describe in their scientific papers as the hybrid age. We have entered a time that they describe as the hybrid age. And when they say the hybrid age, what they're referencing is that all of those technologies that I mentioned earlier, they're sometimes called the GRIN technologies: genetics, robotics, artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, but there's others as well. These technologies are converging right now. They've been running in parallel for a long time, being developed separately as separate technological streams. But you can envision these as streams, and these streams are converging into a great river. And when you take genetics, robotics, artificial intelligence, and nanotechnology, and you combine these technologies, what you have is the power at that point to fundamentally alter, modify the human species through these technologies. And so the term hybrid age, that word hybrid, is in reference to the hybridization of these technologies together to create a technological tool that we will use, as I said, to fundamentally alter our species. Directed evolution, as it were. And, in my book, we talked about Darwin. I demonstrate how Darwin and then Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche, have laid the foundation for a post-human paradigm. Because once you divorce yourself from the biblical narrative, once you divorce yourself from the notion that man was created in the image of God for a very specific purpose, then the worth of the human species is lost, and the road to post-humanism is open. And what I mean by that is, in the time in which we live, there are two fundamental questions that are the most important questions that we can ask ourselves. No other generation ever has had to wrestle with these two questions, had to even contemplate these two questions in the way that we have to today. And they are, number one, what does it mean to be a human being? That's the first question. And the second question is our humanity worth preserving? Those are the two paramount questions for the human species today. What does it mean to be a human being? And is our humanity worth preserving? And the answer to the first question is going to, the way in which you answer the first question is going to bear directly upon your answer to the second question. For example, if you're a secular humanist who believes in evolution by natural selection, then being a human being, what does it mean to be a human being? It means nothing. Being human means nothing. There is nothing special about the human race aside from the fact that we are more intelligent than other species, more clever than other species, more evolved. But other than that, there is no intrinsic meaning. There's no intrinsic purpose to being human if you are a evolutionist, a secular evolutionist. So the answer to the first question, what does it mean to be a human being? Nothing is the answer. It means nothing. And so the answer to the second question is apparent. Is our humanity worth preserving? No. Why should we preserve our humanity? We are just as Nietzsche liked to put it, we are a means to an end. Human species is simply a means to an end. We are merely a step in the evolution of our species. We're a phase. That Homo sapien is merely a phase in the evolution of our species. So the meaning, see, evolution has no meaning, by the way. It has no purpose. It required Friedrich Nietzsche to give it purpose and meaning. I talk about how that, I describe that in the book. But according to Darwin, evolution has no purpose. It's just simply survival, right? There is no purpose. But Nietzsche defined a purpose for evolution. The Nietzschean purpose of evolution is to bring forth the overman, the superhuman, the post-human. He gave evolution a purpose. And that is what's driving, by the way, people like Yuval Noah Harari today in our age is to bring forth what Nietzsche described as the Übermensch, the overman or the superman, which is a post-human being. So the answer to, according to Darwinian evolution, what does it mean to be a human being? Nothing. It means nothing. Is our humanity worth preserving? Absolutely not. In the Nietzschean perspective, what does it mean to be a human being? Well, human beings are a means to an end. Well, what is the end? What is the purpose? What is the purpose? The purpose is to bring forth a post-human species, a godlike creature. And so is our humanity worth preserving? No, absolutely not in that, from that perspective, because if we preserve humanity, then we are inhibiting the rise of the God-man, the Übermensch. And and this is why, of course, I say that the new religion is a pathiotheism. So, but if you were to answer this question from the biblical perspective, you get quite a different answer. What does it mean to be a human being? Well, it means that we were created we are sons and daughters of Adam. Adam was created to be a son of God in the family of God, to have fellowship with the Maker and to govern the earth. That's the purpose of the human species. So that's what it means to be a human being. So is our humanity worth preserving? Absolutely. It is imperative that we preserve our humanity because we have a kinsman redeemer. Jesus died. Jesus became a man to redeem mankind. That's why he became a man, so that he might redeem the sons and daughters of Adam and reconcile us to the Father and restore us to everything that was lost in the first Adam. And if you evolve out of Adam, if you become something other than a human being, then you are no longer a candidate for salvation in the cross of Christ. You no longer have a kinsman redeemer because you are no longer human. So you see how imperative it is to remain human. So the answer to these are the two most paramount questions of our time. What does it mean to be a human being? That's why we have to understand the gospel of Christ, and we have to understand who we were created to be, who Adam was, and we have to understand how important it is to preserve our humanity, not only to retain dominion of the earth, but also to even be a candidate for redemption and reconciliation through the work of Christ. Jesus, it's very clear in the New Testament, we're told that paraphrasing, of course, that Jesus did not die for the angels, but for the sons and daughters of Adam. He became a man to redeem mankind. That's what a kinsman redeemer is. So these are the questions that are being openly debated now in society, although they're not being phrased in this way. These are the questions. What does it mean to be a human being? Is our humanity worth preserving? And that's why I felt such an urgency in writing and publishing Birthright, because Birthright answers those two questions.
And that's why I felt an urgency that I had to interview you, because I'm seeing what's going on in the world. And it also explains, why would humans want to give up their birthright? You explained it, but also it's just like with Eve, they want, like, hey, if I have the Neuralink, or if I have something in my brain and I could just like have knowledge at my fingertips, all this knowledge. I mean, that's like the same as Eve. And then also they can entice people with the technology saying, hey, you'll live a long time, or you'll never die, or you can be just like gods. Now, there was something else in your book. I mean, there's so many things. Okay, here's the book. And the link is going to be in the description, but because there's just so many details. But Timothy, I found it also interesting when you were describing a post-human army war, a kinetic war in Psalm 2. And before you get to that, when I'm looking at what's going on with some armies, you all will know that's acting like really, really crazy that we're seeing in the world right now. That seem to, they could be shot at and they're still just like acting like with all this crazy strength, but they are being pumped up with drugs. So if you could see something like that happening, well, now it explains, like in Bible prophecy, of an army, a post-human kind of army. So can you explain the kinetic war?
Yes, we're all familiar with the Battle of Armageddon that is coming at the end of the age. I believe that Armageddon is going to be a kinetic war with God, specifically with Christ returning. And when I say kinetic, I mean a physical war. I think people often imagine these things as, spiritual, ethereal, non-tangible. I think it's quite the opposite. We're looking at a physical conflict that what the dragon is preparing is a war with the king and the armies of heaven. And this is, this gets us into some philosophical and theological thoughts here. But, there is such thing as the host of heaven. That word host in Hebrew, it's indicative of an army. It's militaristic. There is an army of heaven. And Jesus said that the kingdom of heaven suffers violence, and the violent take it by force. Clearly, there is a kinetic war raging in the cosmos. And Armageddon is kind of the crescendo of this war. And I believe that the dragon's ultimate purpose in establishing the empire of the beast is to resist the return of Christ, which is inevitable. And how will they resist the return of Christ? Well, they'll do it with the post-human army and with exceedingly advanced technology. So I think we have a misconception that Armageddon is a war with Israel. It's not. It's a war with Christ, because that's what unfolds. Christ returns with the armies of heaven to make war on the beast and his armies, the empire of the beast. And this happens, by the way, after one of the most crucial visions that John has in the book of Revelation, in which he's standing in heaven in a vision, and he sees the Father sitting on the throne, and the Father has a scroll in his right hand. And an angel declares with a loud voice, "Who is worthy to take the scroll and break its seals?" And there was silence in heaven. No one, neither in heaven or on earth, was found to be worthy to take the scroll from the Father's hand and break the seals. Now, what in the world is going on here? Well, obviously something very important, because John begins to weep bitterly. at this point. He's weeping over a scroll. Why is he weeping over the scroll? Well, you have to understand the context of what's unfolded on earth. The beast has arisen in the earth. The earth has been usurped from the sons and daughters of Adam and is being governed. There's a hybrid empire governed by the offspring of the dragon. And of the dragons, I would say plural, the 10 kings who are governing the earth and who are preparing to make war with the Son of God. And John is standing there weeping in the vision, and because no one was found worthy to take this scroll. Well, I think we need to ask, what is the scroll? What does it represent? Because it's so crucial to what we've been discussing. The scroll, in my estimation, is clearly the title deed of the earth. It is the birthright of mankind, of Adam. And why is no one found worthy in heaven or earth to open that scroll? Because only the offspring of Adam have the right to rule. And there are no legitimate heirs who are able to take the scroll, to take dominion of the earth, because they're human enough to do so and are strong enough to overcome this hybrid empire that is governing the earth at the end of the age. And John is weeping bitterly. But that's not where the vision ends. The angel says to John, "Do not weep, because there is one who is able to take the scroll." And he says do not weep, because the Lamb of God has overcome and is able to take the scroll and open its seals. And John looked and saw at the right hand of the Father a lamb as if it had been slain, which is, of course, a reference to Jesus. And this lamb was able to take the scroll from the hand of the Father and begin to break its seals, to open the scroll. And as he's breaking these seals, it's judgment on the empire of the beast, and calamity is breaking out on the earth. And basically, the breaking of the scrolls is pouring out judgment on the dragon and the beast and their empire on earth. And ultimately, what happens is that the Son of God takes the scroll, dominion of the earth, and has all authority to do so. Jesus said that all authority in heaven was given to him and on earth. In heaven as the Son of God, on earth as the Son of Man. Even if there is no more, even if there are no more human beings left on planet Earth, there is still a Son of Man seated at the right hand of the Father, an offspring of Adam, indeed in the line of David, Jesus of Nazareth. And he is able to take dominion of the earth because he has inherited the birthright of Adam, and he has the authority to rule as a human being on earth. And that is why he takes the scroll, breaks its seals, and as I said earlier, the crescendo of all of this is he returns to the earth with the armies of heaven to vanquish the beast and to govern the nations. And so this is a kinetic war, Christ returning with the armies of heaven, and the beast and the dragon attempting to resist him. And at that time, it would be with a post-human army, and with the dragon and his angels. And this is a technological kinetic war with the Son of God. And it really frames Armageddon in a much more tangible light, and it becomes very visceral, this idea of war with God at the end of the age. That is the ultimate objective here by the dragon, and of course the dragon being a moniker for the devil, is to forestall, to resist the return of Christ. Because we know what happens when Christ returns. He vanquishes the armies of the beast and takes dominion of the earth, and then he casts the beast into the lake of fire, and the prophet, and then Satan is of course bound in the bowels of the earth for 1,000 years. So this is what is unfolding at the end of the age. And again, going back to Yuval Noah Harari, who is out there talking about in 100 to 200 years from now, there will be no human beings left on planet Earth, and that corresponding with the fact that we are in the age of Pisces, which is going to end in about 150 years. So we are approaching this moment in time rapidly. We are at the beginning of the end of the age.
Okay. And I know that you said like some people will debate with you, like, wait a minute, how could we live for like 100 or 200 years like this? And maybe things will be speeded up. I don't know. I know that, but you explain a lot more in your book. And Timothy, can you just give your website so people could know where to find you? And again, his book, we're going to have it in the description, a link to where you can get it. But yeah, if you can give your website.
My website is timothyalberino.com. And if I can, I would like to let people know that obviously in the book, all of these things that may seem quite extraordinary to people and unbelievable I go through each one of these things in sequence and explain how they're related and offer a whole lot of, as you said earlier, biblical and historical footnotes so that you can track and make up your own mind about what I'm saying. But also I'd like to let people know that I have a members community that I've launched. It's a subscription community, and I am kind of in my members community really going deep in these topics and offering a lot of content that isn't publicly available. And if people are interested in that, they can go to the alberinoanalysis.com, where you can find a link for it also under the members tab of my on my website.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so very much.
Well, thank you so much for having me.